Hey everyone, I recently had the chance to sit down for a great conversation with John Wilson from MetsMerise.com. John is a knowledgeable and passionate voice in the Mets community, covering everything from player performances to front office decisions. Over the next 35 minutes, we'll dive into all things Mets, breaking down the team's outlook, discussing offseason moves, and analyzing what's ahead for the franchise. As a Mets fan, this was a huge opportunity to get insights from someone who follows the team as closely as I do. Big thanks to John for sharing his time and expertise. Let's get into it.
What are some big expectations you have for the Mets this season? With the addition of Juan Soto, bring back Pete, bring back Mania. What are some like realistic expectations we should expect from this team this
Yeah,
season?
yeah, for sure. So I think expectations are riding high right now with the Mets. Obviously with
Yeah.
the off season moves they had with Soto bringing back Peak, like you said. But I want to be realistic. They have a very tough NL East division. You got the Phillies, who are just a perennial team right there. They have a bunch of all-stars on the team. They have a great starting staff. They got Harper and Trey Turner and everything like that. So you have the Phillies, who are really the top dog right now in the NL East. And then you also got the Braves, who made some really good moves too. They got Jackson Profar in the offseason. So those are two tough teams right now in the NL East that they have to get through. So realistically, I mean, obviously, I love the Mets and I want them to do as good as they can. But I think they might be fighting for another wild card spot. I don't think this is the year yet where they're the top dog in the NL East. I still think that's either the Phillies or the Braves, but the Mets are definitely competing for that top dog spot.
Yeah. I put them in my rankings. I put them ahead of the Phillies, but I still think the Braves win the division this year. As much as I like the Phillies roster on paper, a lot of those guys are in their 30s or getting up there. So like I could see a few injuries derailing that team for a couple
Yep.
months. Like let's say Wheeler hits the IL or Trey Turner, Schwarber hit the IL for a little bit. I could see that really hurting them. I also think they may be trying to like get their mojo back a little bit after Mets knocked them out last year
Yeah.
in the division. So I think the Mets ceiling, the Phillies roster on paper is better, but I think the Mets have the chance to have the higher ceiling this year, definitely. It's also gonna get past LA. Like I don't personally see us winning a 7 game series against LA this year. Anything can happen, but like on paper, I still have LA repeating this year as the
Yeah, I
champs of the
mean, LA,
division.
and they beefed it up in the offseason too. They just keep getting
Yeah.
better. So
Yeah, I think LA is definitely they're gonna get even better somehow. But the Braves, you still gotta, as much as I like them, you're still gonna have to count on Strider bouncing back and Riley and Olsen bouncing back to their averages. So I don't see I certainly think the Mets can win like 88 to 90 or so games, but I think the fight's gonna be a little bit harder this year, especially with the Braves getting better. I think the Braves roster returning to health. I think the Phillies are gonna get. I think the Phillies they'll still be a good, even though I put them in third place, they'll still be a very good team. Like I could
oh
easily
yeah.
see 95 to 100 wins again, no matter
Yeah.
what. How do you see Soto? What impact do you see Soto having on this team compared to last year? Like, what do you think? Do you think he's gonna make the whole team better, or do you think he's gonna like what do you see his role being this
Yeah,
year in this
absolutely.
first year on the team?
I think obviously putting him in the lineup is going to make him remarkable, in any spot in the lineup. Right now, they haven't batted him two, mostly in the spring training. He's already got 2 home runs in like 4 or 5 games in spring training only. So he's already making his impact in the lineup. And I think he's going to help the players around him just by being in the lineup, not even talking about from a team chemistry standpoint. I'm talking about from a statistic standpoint. He's going to eat away pitches from pitchers. He takes a lot of walks. That's what he's also known for, getting his on base percentage up. He's prone to hit 30, 40 home runs, every season, getting 100 RBIs. So just being in that lineup will really make a huge difference and a huge dividend. Right now, like I said, they got him in the second spot. He's batting behind Lindor, so hopefully Lindor gets some more pitches. And obviously, when they switched Lindor to the first spot last year, I mean, he took off. He had a whole different season. His trajectory went way differently. He was a candidate for the MVP in that first spot. So having someone like Soto behind him will make him a lot better. And also having Soto in front of Pete, as much as you want to protect Soto, Soto actually can do a good job to protecting Pete as well. Pete will see probably more pitches, people might go after him because they think obviously Soto is a better pitcher. They might pitch around Soto, but now you have a man on first and second for Pete. That's a great opportunity for Pete to kind of maybe switch up his style. I know he's been really focusing on more of the power in his aspect, but this could maybe bring him around back to his contact game when he first got up to the big leagues, where he was hitting above 250. Like that could definitely be a change for him. So we could see a lot of changes in the lineup from there. And then like it loops around, so they're gonna attack the lower place, lower batting order rankings, like the 7, 8, 9 hitters, but you'll see, Soto can really make the team a lot better. And he's quite quote unquote potentially a liability in the outfield, but he might be switching off with DH. So that could be an opportunity for, getting someone back in right field, to make that maybe like a prospect or something like that, get them up there.
I could definitely see a scenario where the Mets play around with the lineup all year. Like the lineup doesn't stay the same. I would love, I don't know how, I would like to see Soto in the four at some point this year because I think if you put Lindor, my opinion is if you put Lindor and Soto top two, great. But then they're just, I get the scenario where they get walked a lot, and especially if like Vientos hits a cold spell or Alonso starts striking out a lot. That's my main fear is if the pitcher's like, oh, all I have to do is walk these guys, and then I can just I can ambush Vientos, Soto, Alvarez if Alvarez slumps. So I want to see a scenario where like Mendy plays it based on the hot hand or cold hand this year, like based on who's good. That's where you're going in the lineup. Like I wouldn't be afraid to put Vientos. Let me be honest, like I wouldn't be afraid to put Vientos six if he starts like really struggling this year, like if he hits
Yeah,
his sophomore slump.
absolutely. And that's what Mendoza did last year. He did a really good job with that, mixing around the lineup. It wasn't set. I think they had Nimmo in the leadoff spot for the beginning of the year. And then he just kept making switches. They put Nimmo at third. He didn't do great, so they had to keep moving him around. So he just found a good sweet spot with Lindor at first, and they kind of kept moving around. I know Pete batted between third and fourth a lot. And I know I'm reading this book it's actually called The Book. It's all about like statistics and number crunching of like batting orders and baseball in general. And they talk about that. They say like the two best spots to put your best hitter on is the 2 and 4 hole. So look for that, maybe switch, like you said, put Soto in the four sometimes. Who knows? It's really up to Mendoza. And he did a great job of like having a good pulse on what to do with the team that he can do a really good job of that for the second year.
Yeah, my hope is I really want to see Alvarez really take that big jump this year and hit like put himself in the five hole, like cement himself. We saw a little bit of it in 2023. He had moments of it in 2024, but he slumped a little bit. I think of the injury played a big part of it, in
Yes.
recovering that whole year from the hand. But I really want to. I think this is his year. Like we need to see some progress, make him take that step into that prospect status he was that pedestal he was placed on as a prospect.
Absolutely. He had a great 2023 season when he came up,
Yeah.
He had 25 home runs, I think it was, and like 60 RBIs or something like that. So he really showcased his power that he has, that ability to power. But like I think like you said, that thumb injury really hurt him for a large part of the season. And I don't think he had a pretty solid start to the season, but I don't think he was the same after that. He was battling that the whole time. That's not easy to hold a bat with a hurt thumb, So I think that really did play a factor in him. But now he's got some rest in him. I know he's trying to fix his swing. He went to one of the batting labs this offseason, and a lot of people have gone to this batting lab, and I think that will help his swing a lot too. So I agree with you. I hope he really breaks out and has that power to bump back up into that 5 hole. That would be great.
The other thing I really want to see this year is I really want to see Beatty take that second base spot and run with it. We're seeing it in spring training already. Again, it's not going to translate to opening day, but I really want to see him take that next step and also become that prospect that everyone was talking about when he was first called up. Like it's in there. You've seen it with the he has the defensive potential. He has the hitting potential. He's got to put it all together. And I think him working with Soto too, working with Lindor could really take him to the next level.
Yeah, so Beatty's having a great spring season right now. I think he's got 2 home runs, got a couple RBIs underneath him. I think his OPS is like over 1,000, which is great. So if he can continue that into the regular season, that would be good. I also really I'm a big fan of the come up of Luis Angel Acuna. I think he did great at the end of the year when he got called up to sub in for Lindor when he was hurt. And I think that might give him a lot of push to get in that second base spot, I think he can play that middle infield really well, and I think he would be a really good good MLB player, to be honest. He's got a lot of tools to him. I know his contact, I know his hitting isn't as good maybe as Beatty's, but Beatty hasn't proved himself yet to be consistent at that level. So if Beatty is consistent at that level, I think he'd be really good at that second base spot. But I really do like the opportunity that Acuna presents himself if he can solidify that. And just speaking of second base too, I don't know. I'm not a fan of Jeff holding down that position right now because it's kind of I personally feel like it might be like time to start looking for other potential opportunities outside of Jeff McNeil for that second base spot. Jeff was great for a long time, you know what I'm saying? He was a batting champ, you know. So he really did have it, but I think it's at the point where you start to look for other maybe young and upcoming talent like you're saying with Batty or maybe Acuna, you know, maybe Ronnie Mauricio. I know he's coming back off his ACL injury. Those could be guys that are maybe fighting for that second base spot.
Yeah, as much as I love what Jeff's done for us 2019, 2022, I think it's time to explore trade options for him. I would not hate the idea of trading him for like a high potential starting pitcher or a high end reliever. Just get it, being able to shred that salary, who's ever willing to take on the contract. Same with, as much as I love Marte from 2022, I wouldn't mind finding a trade partner for Marte. My idea would be like Marte McNeil and one of the prospects for like Dylan Cease or whoever hits the market in July. I think Alcantara could very easily hit that market by the time we're there.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I kind of like Marte, just being in that platoon spot right now with the DH. I kind of like that split of like the Winker Marte position because Marte has, interestingly, I know his defense was a total liability last year. And I think he might have lost a step or two, you know, with that groin injury and everything. But I still think he's a very good threat on the bases. So when Marte gets on, he can steal bases. Although his speed might not be as good as it once was, I think he still has the natural ability to read a pitcher and to steal that base. So having that difference maker, I think is a good opportunity to keep Marte. Now, obviously, if you get a really good trade package with him, that's a different story. But I do like where they're starting with that platoon position DH of Winker and Marte.
I think the Mets, they're going to start the year with the Winker Marte platoon. But I think in giving these at bats at second base, like maybe Beatty or Acuna or Beatty, Acuna, Mauricio, they're going to try and see who they can fit into that DH spot by the end of the year. Like, let's say Mauricio comes up, he tears it up. Like, he could come and grab that spot by October. Like, he could be our DH, and I would love that. Like, really want to see Mauricio. I really liked what we saw from him
Yeah,
in
and that's
at the
very
end of that a couple of years ago.
it's very similar to what they were how like kind of like Vientos came up. They didn't really have a position for Vientos, you know, and they kind of stuck him in that DA spot last year, and then they were like, oh well, we're gonna give it to JD Martinez. So he went down, then he came back up and he kind of made a name for himself. I think he hit that late inning home run, and like I was like, oh, okay, let's find a spot for him. And he found a nice groove at third base, you know. So anything can happen, like you said, like you might have a young gun coming up in that DH spot instead of that Winker Marte platoon.
Yeah. What do you see as this how do you think this organization views Drew Gilbert right now? Because you never really see him being talked about right now, like on the opening day roster plans. And the fact that he was an Epler trade and not a Stearns trade makes me think like they may not view him as highly as we did a couple years ago. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of think that Drew Gilbert, you asked this question on the itinerary too. I
Mm.
think Drew Gilbert area is interesting. I think he's in a tough spot because he's an outfielder and there's a lot of outfield depth right now on that Mets roster. So he's kind of like, where do I fit in type of situation. And then the Mets have a pretty strong up and coming infield prospects, you know. So it's like, do you want to change his position? What do you want to really do with this guy? So I think he might be a really good trade target, you know, selling him to something else to maybe get back a starting pitcher or a relief pitcher or something like that during the deadline. You know, and I was looking at his numbers yesterday. He struggled a bit last year in the AAA. But yeah, it was interesting. I think Drew Gilbert might be a good trade piece for a potential reliever or a starter or somewhere down the like in the trade deadline.
Yeah, I definitely, I want to see Gilbert do well too, but I think he doesn't I don't see a fit for him on the roster this year. And if it becomes to a point where like if not now when Siri's great on defense, Taylor as they're not the most consistent with the hitting, but I think like in center fields, good defense is all you can really ask for, especially with how strong the rest of the lineup is. Just prioritizing that defense in center fields is the most important part.
Yeah, you got the platoon of Siri, Taylor, you got Nimmo out and left, Soto out and right, and then you have Jet Williams, who's also like one of the top prospects for the Mets. He could play up the middle on the infield, but he also is a really good outfielder too. He plays that center field position. So I do think it's a little crowded for Drew Gilbert, and I think it might pose him some difficulty coming up. So that's why I think he might be a trade prospect coming down the line.
Yeah. Moving on to the pitching side, do you think the Mets are taking the Paul Skeens approach with Brandon Sproat, where they keep him in the minors for a couple weeks and then they bring him up? Because the stuff we're seeing out of camp is fantastic right now. Like he looks
Yeah,
like someone who can very easily slide in for Mania or become the fifth starter, take over as one of the
yeah, absolutely. So
one of the starters.
he's having a really good spring season so far. And it's tough to really gauge sometimes spring training because you're not
Yeah,
really versing the top of the top for the MLB. So it's a little bit different. But I don't know, they might do something like you said, with the Pittsburgh pitcher, or they might do something like kind of like what they did with Christian Scott, maybe call him up in May, something like that. Let him get his feet wet a little bit, because he is doing really well in spring training, but you don't want to rush him too much and have him have a step back. You know what I'm saying? So you don't want him to like
Mhm.
lose his confidence by pushing him up too quick. And then all of a sudden he's not performing at the MLB level, and then he's really struggling to get his feet back underneath him. So I think he can manage the MLB, especially, he's showcasing it right now in spring training. And I would love for him to be like that back end starter in the 4 or 5 hole, but we'll see. I don't really know what their expectations are with him. And he had a phenomenal in-game interview with, I think it was Gary Cohen that he had it with.
Yeah,
And they were talking about how the pitching lab has really helped progress him. And that's like something that you hear a lot from a lot of the pitching prospects of how good the Mets pitching lab is and how well it really allows them to get their stuff together. And it's like one of the best in the major league. So I remember someone was saying, I don't know if it was him or Jonah Tong, they were saying how if you can't figure it out here, this is the place to figure it out, basically. They have all the resources available to them. This is the place to figure it out. And it seems like it's been working for a lot of the Mets prospects coming up.
yeah. Do you think Kranick or like Sproat or Kranick or one of those guys could end up sliding in for Mania, end up taking Mania's spot like just for a couple weeks while like let's say Mania's back in like mid-April, late April, early May. Do you think there's a scenario where you put Kranick in that spot or Sproat and then you slide one of them into the bullpen if they're still performing well enough to stay in the big leagues?
I think Krynick is more of a reliever, more a bullpen guy, as
Okay.
opposed to a starter. That's just my personal take, just from reading his background and everything like that. Coming off of injuries, being picked up from the waivers from Pittsburgh. I think he's more of a bullpen guy, and I think
Okay.
that's what the Mets have a intention for him. Sproat might be a really good, like you said, prospect to fit in there in the back end. I think obviously now it's coming around with Tyler McGill. He always fights for like one of those last spots in the lineup. And sometimes he does really well in that spot. So that would be great if he can turn it on again. And then you also have Christian Scott coming back, at some point. So maybe that could be a good opportunity as well. So, or they might shop. You got Paul Blackburn also coming back off of injury. He did really well in his spring training debut. But like I said, they might shop for a starting pitcher for that back end. I don't really know. David Stearns likes to pull a lot of strings, and when the strings he pulls usually results in good results. And it's interesting to see how this pitching rotation is made up of that. Similar to last year, there were a lot of question marks going in with Severino and Mania, people who had down years and they were trying to recreate themselves and have a comeback year. And both of them had phenomenal years. So Stearns has a really good knack of finding that niche, that thing that the starting pitchers have, and just getting the most out of them. So let's see what David Stearns does, and we'll see how he does. And yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see.
I
Have faith.
get I could see Canning in that late inning bullpen spot in October by the end of the year. Like if he, I think there's something I saw on Twitter, something around where he was working on a new cutter or a new slider, and I think if he puts that in effect and he's really good and becomes like this lefty shutdown guy, they could easily put him in that bullpen spot at the end of the year. Like
Yeah, I think I
maybe
think
not great as a starter, but if you can get him for like a couple innings out of the bullpen,
absolutely. I think he's got a three-pitch arsenal right now, like you're saying, four-seamer, curveball, and a slider. So yeah, that'd be good.
I think this rotation is going to look very different than it does. It's going to look very different at the end of the year. than it does right now. We saw that last year. Like the guys in the rotation didn't change very much, but their importance changed and their roles changed and their role on the team definitely changed throughout the year.
Yeah. And it was great. We also got Senga coming back too. That would be a really good keep an eye on. He came back, looked great in his comeback. I think he played against the Braves, struck out like 9 people in 5 innings or something like that. It was something ridiculous. Then he hurt his calf again, and he was out. And then I think he kind of rushed back coming back in the playoffs. He wasn't up to his normal self, and that might be because he's playing at a higher level in the playoffs. But I think now that he has the full rest of the offseason, I think he'll be a really good position to have, good person to have back in the rotation.
Yeah. I love Senga as a pitcher. I just don't know how comfortable I am relying on him to stay healthy throughout the year. And that's why I've been really hoping they get like a Cease type starter or Cease or Alcantara or just some other number one guy because as much as I love Minaya, I love Senga. I think Peterson can keep up his 2024 stats. I just want to have like that one anchor guy at the top of like a Corbin Burns, like someone who's like at that top of the rotation. You can count on to go out there, throw 5, 6 innings,
Yeah,
six,
and
seven.
when the Mets were in that really bad downturn last year, they were like 10 games on the 500 or something like that. They really missed that that fifth day starter. Every 5 days you have that one guy, like a Jacob deGrom. Every 5 days you have that one guy to all right, stop the bleeding. Let's go out there. Let's play our pitch our best game that we could, and really get our team back into it. They really did miss that, especially when Senga went down. So if we could rely on Senga, okay, Senga could produce that, but he wasn't there last year. That's what it came down to.
Yeah, I don't think throwing him into that starting spot against the Dodgers was the best idea. I fully think he wanted to do it, and I was fine with it, and I was even excited about it at the start of the game. But then I realized like I don't think this was the best idea because LA does not LA doesn't swing and miss. Like they make you throw strikes. They're not like the Phillies where they're just going to swing at a lot of stuff. Like they do not swing at balls, which was insane to watch. Like they are insanely patient at the plate.
And their top three is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's literally like murderer's row. Who do you want to pitch to in any of that?
No, I don't want to pitch to anyone in that. In
No.
that, yeah. I also think part of my reason for wanting to switch around the Mets lineup a lot is what I liked what the Dodgers did, having Freeman or Otani one and Freeman at number two. Like that's not really what you would think of as your like. I would have Otani like ideally you'd have Otani 3 and 4 or Freeman 2 and Otani 4. But I really liked having that 1-2 ambush at the start, like the way they had that 1-2 ambush at the start of the game. And I think that's why I think I like it's why I've warmed up to Lindor Soto 1 and 2, but I just wouldn't mind them swapping around a little bit this year, like
Yeah.
seeing what's the most effective.
And like you said, that might be a little top heavy too, having Soto that 1-2 and Lindor that 1-2.
Yeah. Do you see Nimmo at I could see Nimmo at the 5 this year if he's like heating up well, or Nimmo at the 4, because as much as I like Pete, he's also known to slump a lot. So I think being able to move him down if like Nimmo's hot, Alonso's cold, or Alonso's hot, Nimmo's cold, just being able to swap those two
Yeah.
um when like one of them's struggling, or just giving them like the other one a room to breathe, a room to just like clear their head during like a slump, just being able to like move them down in the order and not putting all the pressure in them on their mentally.
Yeah, Pete can be very streaky at times, and I'm not the biggest fan of him at the 4 hole. I know he changed his game a lot, going from that high on base percentage to more of that power swing. So you could see him potentially break out in that 4 spot. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily how I envision Limo. Maybe that's a bit of my bias talking because I've seen him grow up with the on base percentage. But he has the power. He's showing that he has the power. So I don't know. He struggled last year in that 3 spot. So I don't know if that 4 spot is a good spot for him. Like you said, I think maybe a 5 hole hitter would be good for him. And like we were talking about a little bit earlier, Alvarez might have a breakout season. He might come back and have a phenomenal season. The batting lab might work towards his benefit. He might have a great power swing coming back. He might be in that 4 hole. I know in 2023 he was batting that 4 hole a lot. So you could see Alvarez coming back in that more of that power spot as well.
Yeah, I also wouldn't hate Nimmo 6 and McNeil 7 because my thought process here is if you get Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Alvarez is your 1 through 5. That's like very top heavy, very based on power. And then if Nimmo and McNeil can get on base, that's like those two would be leadoff hitters or 1-2 on like maybe an AL Central team or an NL Central team. So I could see that really working into effect. Like if Nimmo can get on, McNeil can like flick a single or hit a double because those can be like it basically can flip over a new lineup basically. Where do you see Lindor taking on that official captain role this year? By the end, do you
So
think like they're gonna finish?
I might have a little bit of a bias here, but I would love for a captain to be homegrown. Now, obviously, Keith Hernandez, obviously one of the most recognizable Mets captains. He wasn't homegrown, but it would be great if they were homegrown. I think I have a bias because I grew up, watching David Wright, and he came up to the farm system. He was the captain. He was like Captain America. He was Mets through and through. So like that's what I have maybe a bias of. But I think Lindor would be a great captain, to be honest. He really has a great pulse in this team. I mean, he puts his body out there and in, day out. He is literally the heart and soul of this team. And he came in he got an all-star snub last year and he came in second in the NL MVP race. So it just shows you how much of an impact he has as a player, but that team chemistry he has too, that team dynamic that he really brings to the table. So like when he called that all players meeting, it seemed like it turned the season around for them. I think it was in late May. It turned the season around for them. And he was the conduit of that. He really sparked that team. He really got everyone going. Okay, we are not here to lose games. We are here because we believe in ourselves and we are going to win. So I really think he has that presence of the team chemistry, which will really help him as a captain. And I think he kind of, if even if he doesn't get the C right now on his chest, he's already acting as a team captain.
Exactly.
He's already got the team morale going. So he's already doing what a captain would be doing. It's just naming him as the captain. That's the other thing.
Yeah, I definitely think like he definitely in my eyes went and grabbed it that captain spot at the end by the end of the year that grand slam like that was incredible. That was like oh yeah he's our new face of the franchise now. Like I liked when we got him in 2021. He was okay in 2021, put up good numbers in those like next few years, but he wasn't like the Lindor we thought we traded for. And then he just turned it on this year into
Yeah.
that next tier of player.
And even in game 161 against the Braves, when they went down, the Mets went down, then Lindor came back, and he put them back on top. So he really has those shining moments. He comes up in the clutch. He really, like I said, he has that team chemistry, and he's just a player. He knows how to bowl out on when he gets out in the field. So it'll be great to see him get that captain position as well.
Yeah. The other thing I'm not necessarily slightly worried about, but do you think Heat's confidence is going to be shaken up a little bit by how the free agency process went this year? And considering the fact he's still technically on a 1-year deal, if
Yeah.
he opts out, like, do you think that's going to affect him the same way it did a little bit last year?
I mean, so it's not showing right now in all the interviews that he's having in the spring training. It's really not showing. It seems like he's doing fine. He's ready to play. He wanted to be a Met, so I don't think it had that much of an impact, but it could like that as something. They were long, arduous talks, for months, what I'm saying? So it was not an easy task, even Steve Cohen was talking about it. It's not an easy task to go through that. So it might have an impact on him, but right now, whatever he's showing to the media, showing that he has not an impact at all. So he's ready to play. He's ready to go. He's doing great. He's got a couple RBIs already in spring training. He's hitting the ball. He's doing well. And I think he's vibing with the team.
I think putting some kind of protection behind him. I don't know what that looks like at this point right now, but I think again having Alvarez getting going would be huge because that if you sandwich him in between Vientos and Alvarez, that gives him a lot more. That takes a lot less pressure off him. If you know there's one guy in front of him, one guy behind him who can just hit the crap out of the ball. Like
Yeah, absolutely. And let's hope that Vientos has a
yeah,
good season like he did last year. He really had a breakout year, but let's hope he can consistently deliver at that level. That would be great.
yeah. Do you think the Madrigal injury is going to put the Mets in a spot to maybe consider bringing Jose Iglesias back, or do you think that ship's like completely sailed? You think he's
I
done?
think that ship's completely sailed. From what I read, they said that
Okay.
it's really not a good fit. So I actually went to the game last year when Jose Iglesias performed OMG, after the
Oh.
game. It was so
Yeah.
cool. It was awesome. Everyone was into it. And he really brought that like extra flavor from that team chemistry perspective. But like, I don't know. I don't even know if he'd be able to do that the same. Not the OMG stuff. He could do that again. But I'm saying the actual
Hmm.
batting percentage that he had. He was batting over 300 at the end of the season. It was amazing. He really had a phenomenal season. So to keep that up, that would be really amazing. I think that kind of was like his like silhouette, of his one season that was really good. I think it would be very tough for him to repeat that performance that he had for an entire season again. I mean, he might be able to do it, but I think it would be very tough. And I don't think, from what I've been reading, that a lot of the front office thinks that he can repeat that as well. So I think that's why they're kind of splitting ways with him. And he's older, he's more of a veteran player. So they might want to give those young bucks a good look, as opposed to someone else like getting a veteran in there.
I think my thought process was like, obviously I don't want Iglesias. I wouldn't want Iglesias starting, but I think having him, my idea was to have him on the bench or in a Kike Hernandez like role, where if you can have him play second, third, or short, just like to fill in if a guy's injured for a few days, or just like be that backup guy who's around if disaster strikes. But the fact that he's demanding a major league contract with no options, that kind of puts the Mets in an awkward spot if Beatty's good or Acuna's good. Like kind of
Right.
doesn't give him anywhere to play.
Exactly. And that's kind of like the next wave of the franchise, those young guns. Like, do you want like a veteran player who's only out there as a utility player? Or, and then this is the other side of it, do you want those prospects coming up, which seems more logical, but then again, do you want your prospects sitting on the bench as well? So it's kind of like that gray area, that catch 22 of like, what do you do? What's your take on this? I personally think it'd be a good position to have those young guns come up and try to fight for that second place position, or maybe that utility player, position. But I'm not the GM. It sounds like that's the direction that the Mets are going in, but we'll see.
Yeah. Do you think they're gearing up to go make a big push for Vlad, or do you think this is like that the Soto's going to be like their last big signing for a while? Like, do you?
Uh, So kind of two parts to that question. I don't think Soto will be their last big signing. I think they'll continue to make splashes, but I
Okay.
don't think they're going to go for Vlad. I think what they're actually
No.
looking for in the future is they have a young prospect at first base, Ryan Clifford,
Yeah.
and he hit a home run, I think, in yesterday's spring training game. He's already performing at a nice level. So I think that's kind of where they're seeing their foreseeable future. I think he's a big bat. He's got a big bat as a left-hander. And yeah, I think that's kind of the momentum that they got going into it, with maybe thinking about Ryan Clifford as their long-term first baseman as opposed to going shopping on the market for Vlad. And knowing that Pete might still be a Met, they might switch Pete to the permanent DH spot and have Ryan Clifford at first base. So that is kind of what I kind of envision how the Mets foresee their future at first base, having Ryan Clifford come up and kind of transitioning Pete to that DH spot for the foreseeable future.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would love, well, I would love having Vlad here, but I don't think tying up 100 million or 110, 120 into three players is a great idea because it's just going to eat up at your salary. And as much as Steve Cohen, we know him as like this guy has 20 billion bucks, like he can spend however much he wants. There is an eventual limit on how much you can do. And I don't think he wants to, eventually he's going to want to reset the tax. We already see he wants to reset the tax. He wants to be able to keep developing young guys. And so I
Yeah.
don't think like sinking, and especially if Vientos keeps playing well, I don't think there's a necessity for Vlad. If Vientos keeps it up, Alonso's solid this year. I don't, he becomes way more of a want than a necessity compared to a
Yeah.
team where like the Red Sox or Toronto, well, he's going to be a necessity.
Yeah, yeah. And I just like how you talk about Steve Cohen. I think he slightly he was definitely like, oh, I'm gonna spend, spend, spend on like market value free agents, try to get the best of the best in the free agent world. And that's when he got like Scherzer and he got Verlander. And I think after those Scherzer Verlander acquisitions, he was like, this is not working out. And he said he needed a new, different approach. So I think that they really invested in the pitching lab. They invested in their minors. So they have people coming up through the farm system, but they also have the ability to go out after those big name market guys in the offseason to, if they need to make that splash, like they did for Juan Soto. They're not afraid of spending the money. They also have that homegrown talent. So it's a kind of a great combination to be in this spot for as a Mets fan.
Yeah, I think having Lindor and Soto as your two guys who are you pay the most money for, but they're worth the most money. That's basically what the Dodgers have right now, right? They have the money tied up in Freddie, and Mookie. Shohei, with all the deferred stuff, I don't really count that with how that contract is structured. And although he is, the best player on that team, so I don't. I think that's honestly how the Mets view it too. Like you need like those two guys who are like the anchors of your lineup, and then the rest you can kind of play around and see what works out. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So and I think just like wrap it up a little. I think like this Mets team. I want to temper expectations like for this fan base because I think a lot of people are going to be expecting like a World Series or bust mentality. And as much as I would love a World Series and a championship, I'm not going to put that as in like the one of the most likely outcomes this year. Again, the Braves are still out there, the Phillies are still out there, the Dodgers are only going to get better. But I think our outlook long term is better than like the Braves or the Phillies. So I think I want to kind of like preach patience a little bit because as
Absolutely.
the Dodgers have been great for like what the last 13, 12 years, and they just now got their first full 162 ring. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. As much as that's what I was saying in the beginning of the show, we were saying how a lot of people probably expect them to get World Series or get back in the playoffs, but they still got a tough road, man. They still got to be top dogs in the NL East. Right now, it's still the Phillies and the Braves. They have both phenomenal teams, but we just signed Soto for a 15-year deal, so let it play out. We got time. And I think there's what, like 10 years left on Lindor's contract as well. So we got time. We got time for that.
yeah, yeah. Also, but now I think it's also I could also see the Nationals getting a little bit better this year. I think Wood takes the next step. Cruz is gonna hopefully, or Cruz is probably gonna take the next step. They got that Hassel guy down in the AAA, so I could see the Nationals maybe reaching like that 500 record this year. So they probably still won't make the playoffs, but I could definitely see them still giving the Mets a tougher fight than they did
Yeah,
last
still enough to
year.
be a pain. Still enough to be a pain in the NL East.
Yeah, and the Mets will always play the Marlins the way that's always
No,
gone.
yep. And
So
the Marlins always play the Mets well.
yeah, and that so I still want to see them obviously win a chip in the next couple of years, but I think just like giving Steve Cohen and Stearns that time to build around the roster is the most important mindset to have here because again, it took the Dodgers this long to get a legitimate ring after all this time, and it didn't happen overnight, and I don't think that's what we should expect as a fan base, especially coming off the Wilpons, just having an owner who genuinely seems to care about putting the best product on the field. Um, Maybe not doing everything the fans want, but just like doing what's best long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for talking to me. Thank you so much for
No
taking the
problem.
time to talk to me. Yeah,